This is one of the videos that helped convince a jury to send Patrick Frazee to prison for the rest of his life. It was released to the public just today, and they show Frazee's on-again, off-again girlfriend, Crystal Lee from Twin Falls, walking investigators through various crime scenes. It's been exactly 1 year since 29-year-old Kelsey Berreth went missing in Colorado, and it's been just a few days since Frazee, the father of her child, was convicted of killing her, sentenced to spend the rest of his life in prison.
Thanksgiving morning, a cinnamon roll, a baby girl in her mother's arms. By nightfall, Kelsey Berreth was gone. No body, no confession, just silence, bleach, and a burn pit on a Colorado ranch. This is the true story of trust destroyed and a mother erased by the man she called family. The murder of Kelsey Berreth. Woodland Park, Colorado, looked like something out of a Christmas card. Snow-dusted pines framed quiet roads. Houses sat far apart, tucked behind picket fences and sloping driveways. The town moved slowly, as if time didn't matter much. And that's exactly why Kelsey Berreth chose it. She wasn't the kind of woman who craved crowds or cameras. She was gentle, private, a licensed pilot, soft-spoken, smart, and a doting first-time mom. At just 29, Kelsey had already accomplished more than most, a career in aviation, a home of her own, and a baby girl named Kaylee she adored beyond words. From the outside, she had what many dreamed of, but behind her quiet demeanor, she was constantly compromising. She met Patrick Frazee years earlier. He wasn't flashy. He didn't wine and dine her. He wore cowboy boots and talked horses. A farrier, a horse shoer, from nearby Florissant. Rugged, reserved, confident in that small-town Colorado way. They weren't a perfect match. Kelsey was methodical, gentle, deliberate. Patrick was controlling. Charming when he wanted to be, but quick to correct, quicker to judge. Still, she thought she could fix the rough edges. And when she got pregnant, she believed that love, faith, and a baby could make everything better. They never married. They didn't live together, but they shared custody of baby Kaylee, informally, confusingly, and by Thanksgiving of 2018, something in Kelsey had changed. She'd started pulling back, telling her mother in quiet texts that she wasn't sure how much longer she could do this. This, her mom later learned, meant him. November 22nd, 2018, Thanksgiving Day. Kelsey made cinnamon rolls that morning. She texted her mom, sent a photo of Kaylee with a stuffed animal. It was the last time anyone saw her. Patrick Frazee would later claim that he stopped by to pick up the baby for the holiday. He said Kelsey handed Kaylee over at the door, that she seemed fine, that she just wanted a break. But when Kelsey's phone went silent for 2 days, no calls, no messages, no flight logs from work, her mother, Cheryl, grew uneasy. On December 2nd, Cheryl filed a missing persons report. The police went to Kelsey's townhome. The lights were off, her cars were still there, but inside something felt wrong. Her purse was gone, so was her cell phone. But her makeup bag, something she never left home without, sat untouched. A cold cinnamon roll hardened on the counter, and in the bathroom trash, police found a pair of baby wipes, faintly smeared red. Patrick acted normal, too normal. He said Kelsey had probably left town, that she was overwhelmed, that maybe she didn't want to be found. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't stop, was the trail he'd already left behind. Thanksgiving night in Woodland Park was quiet, the kind of cold that felt sharp, where porch lights flickered early and shadows stretched across snowy lawns. Inside her modest townhome, Kelsey Berreth's light had already gone out. She wasn't missing. She wasn't on a break. She was dead, murdered in her own living room, while her 1-year-old daughter was just a few feet away. But no one knew that yet, because Patrick Frazee made sure they didn't. The plan had started weeks before. Patrick wasn't impulsive. He wasn't messy. He was methodical, quiet, dangerous. He didn't just want Kelsey gone. He wanted her erased from her child's life, from the world, from memory, and he didn't want to do it himself. So he called his secret girlfriend. Her name was Crystal Lee, a former rodeo queen and nurse living in Idaho. She had dated Patrick years earlier, and despite being divorced, with children of her own, she still orbited his life like a dying star. They weren't officially back together, but he fed her just enough attention, just enough promises, just enough once Kelsey's gone, to make her believe they had a future. Over a period of months, Patrick made 3 separate requests. Poison her coffee, smash her with a metal pipe, inject her with a lethal drug. Crystal flew to Colorado each time and backed out each time, but she never warned Kelsey. She never told police. She just went home and waited. And then, on November 22nd, Patrick stopped waiting. Kelsey thought he was dropping by for a quick exchange. Kaylee would go with her father for the holiday. She opened the door, holding a cinnamon-scented candle. She probably smiled. She probably said, "Happy Thanksgiving." She had no idea there was a blindfold in Patrick's pocket. No idea there was a metal baseball bat by the couch. No idea he had already made arrangements to clean up the scene. According to what Crystal would later confess, this is what happened. Patrick told Kelsey he wanted to play a trust game. He said, "Close your eyes. I have a surprise." He placed a sweater over her face. He told her to smell a candle. And while she stood, embarrassed and blindfolded, trusting, he beat her to death with the bat, blows to the head. Blood splattered across the walls, ceiling, couch cushions. The baby was in the next room. Patrick wrapped Kelsey's body in a plastic tote. Then he picked up Kaylee and left. The next day, he called Crystal, told her it was time to clean up the mess. She drove 700 miles to Colorado, let herself into the townhome, and spent 4 hours scrubbing blood out of the walls. She found Kelsey's teeth embedded in the floor. She threw away the baby's toys. She took stained books, bloodied pillows, broken blinds. She dumped it all in a trash bag, then stopped by Sonic for lunch before heading back to Idaho. Meanwhile, Patrick stored Kelsey's body in a stacked hay barn on his rural property. For days, he visited it. He brought Kaylee there. He fed the horses, walked around the barn, with her mother's corpse inside a tote just feet away, and then, when the stench grew too strong, he built a fire pit, a massive open burn. He dumped her body inside and poured motor oil on top. He stood there and watched it burn for hours, feeding wood into the flames as smoke filled the Colorado sky. Neighbors saw the fire. They noticed the smell. They didn't call police. No one knew yet that a man they saw every day was burning the mother of his child. Back at Kelsey's house, the only sign anything had happened was a single cinnamon roll and a faint chemical odor near the walls, the perfect illusion of a woman who simply disappeared. Crystal Lee looked like someone who wouldn't hurt a fly, a mother, a nurse, a church-going woman who once rode horses competitively and taught her daughters to pray before bed. Her friends in Twin Falls, Idaho, described her as ordinary, helpful, a little quiet, but good. No one suspected that she was living a secret life, one tethered to a man with blood on his hands, but that life was unraveling fast. By mid-December 2018, the search for Kelsey Berreth was in full swing. Billboards had gone up. FBI agents were now on the case. Cadaver dogs had been called in. The media swarmed Woodland Park. Patrick Frazee, though, he didn't seem nervous. He made public appearances with Kaylee. He shook his head solemnly and told reporters he just wanted Kelsey home. He claimed she'd run off, said she was probably in Idaho visiting family, said she was stressed. He didn't know investigators were already building a timeline, and that his story didn't match the digital evidence. Kelsey's cell phone had pinged hours after her disappearance, not in Colorado, but in Gooding, Idaho. The signal was brief. A text had been sent to her employer, DOS Aviation, saying she needed time off, another to her mother, but the wording was wrong. The phrasing didn't sound like Kelsey. Detectives tracked the phone activity to a burner phone, and from there to Crystal Lee. When FBI agents showed up at Crystal's work, she trembled. They asked her about Patrick. She lied, said she hadn't seen him in weeks, said she didn't know where Kelsey was, but within 72 hours, her story crumbled. She folded under pressure, told them she had information, told them she needed a lawyer, and then she told them everything. She said Patrick had plotted Kelsey's murder for months, that he asked her to help, that she refused to carry out the killing, but later drove from Idaho to Colorado after the fact to clean the crime scene. She walked agents through the details, how she'd entered Kelsey's home with gloves and bleach, how she'd found blood everywhere, ceiling, couch, baby gate, how she'd seen a tooth on the floor, how she'd spent hours erasing the evidence, and how, on the way out, she'd grabbed Kelsey's cell phone, purse, and keys, and drove them back to Idaho to help with the cover-up. The FBI asked her why she did it. "Because I loved him," she said. "Because I thought he'd never love me if I didn't." She wept, and then she struck a deal. Crystal agreed to testify against Patrick Frazee in exchange for a reduced charge, tampering with evidence. It was the only way to guarantee he'd face a full murder trial. With Crystal's confession, detectives executed a search warrant at Patrick's ranch. They brought cadaver dogs, blood-detecting luminol, a forensics team, and what they found confirmed. Everything: blood under the carpet, blood behind the couch, blood on the fireplace. Microscopic traces the cleaning hadn't erased. They even found Kelsey's blood in a crack beneath the floorboards, so small it could only be seen under UV light. Patrick was arrested in a dramatic takedown in front of his home. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He just stared, stone-faced, as officers read him his rights, and somewhere in Idaho, Crystal Lee packed her bags and prepared to testify against the man she once thought would marry her. The search for Kelsey's body never ended. Long after Patrick Frazee sat in jail and Crystal Lee began rehearsing her testimony with prosecutors, teams of law enforcement were combing every inch of that 35-acre ranch in Florissant, Colorado, the last place Kelsey had ever been alive. They brought in cadaver dogs, forensic archaeologists, and even ground-penetrating radar. They dug near the barn, near the shed, near the makeshift fire pit where Crystal claimed Kelsey's body had been burned. But the Colorado wind had been cruel that December. Patrick had chosen his timing perfectly, just days before a snowstorm blanketed the property. The fire's remnants were cold, the pit was covered in ash and charred debris, but it still whispered of horror. Investigators sifted through the pile by hand: charred bone fragments, a tooth, a melted aluminum can with blood spatter, a scorched button from what may have been Kelsey's blouse, but no full body, no complete skeleton. Patrick had burned her too thoroughly, and that's what terrified her family the most. There would never be a proper burial. No final goodbye, no casket, just ash. While the prosecution built its case, Patrick sat in jail stone silent. No confession, no apology, no admission of guilt. He rarely looked anyone in the eye. He didn't speak to reporters. And in recorded jailhouse calls, his voice remained eerily casual, even when talking about the woman he murdered. But he fought hard behind the scenes. His lawyers filed motions, tried to exclude Crystal's testimony, tried to paint her as a liar, a jealous a woman who acted alone. They claimed Patrick was innocent, that he'd been set up. Then came the trial. In November 2019, exactly 1 year after Kelsey's murder, Patrick Frazee stood trial for first-degree murder, 3 counts of solicitation to commit murder, tampering with the deceased body, tampering with evidence. The courtroom was packed. Kelsey's mother, Kelsey Berreth, sat in the front row every day. She clutched a photo of her daughter and wore a small pin with Kaylee's face. She was quiet, composed, but broken inside. The prosecution didn't need a body. They had something better: Crystal Lee. Crystal took the stand and walked the jury through every chilling detail. How Patrick had plotted Kelsey's death for months. How he had used baby wipes to clean her face after bludgeoning her. How he had stuffed her body into a black plastic tote, rolled it in hay, and left it in a barn. How he later called her to help destroy the evidence, promising they'd finally be free together. She described the smell, the blood, the fire, the lies, and when asked why she hadn't stopped it, she said, "Because I was scared of him, and because I loved him." The defense tore into her, called her a criminal, an accessory, a woman desperate for Patrick's affection, but her story never wavered. The prosecution also presented cell phone GPS data placing Patrick at Kelsey's home during the murder, surveillance footage showing him driving her car afterward, photos of blood splatter in Kelsey's home, testimony from Patrick's own mother, who had seen him burn the fire pit and said nothing, and then, quietly, they dropped the hammer. Kelsey's daughter Kaylee had been present during the murder. A neighbor had heard a child crying for over an hour that afternoon. She was just 14 months old, left alone, while her mother's blood dried on the carpet. The jury didn't need long. After a 2-week trial and just 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict came down, guilty on all counts. Patrick Frazee was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 156 additional years. He never blinked, never apologized, just stared ahead, like nothing had happened. The courtroom was silent when the sentence was read. No outbursts, no cheers, only tears, quiet, trembling sobs that belonged mostly to Kelsey Berreth, who sat gripping the arms of her seat like they were the only things tethering her to this world. Patrick Frazee would die in prison, but Kelsey was still gone, and Kaylee, now just 2 years old, would grow up without ever knowing her mother's voice, or the truth about what her father had done. The custody battle began before the trial even ended. Patrick's mother, Sheila Frazee, petitioned for guardianship of Kaylee, claiming she was the child's paternal grandmother and had the right to care for her, but Cheryl and Daryl Berreth, Kelsey's parents, weren't going to let that happen. They had raised Kelsey to be kind, composed, strong. They had watched her juggle 5 a.m. flight schedules with diaper changes and baby bottles. They had seen the bruises she didn't talk about, the exhaustion she tried to hide. They weren't going to let Kaylee disappear into the same kind of silence that cost Kelsey her life. The court sided with the Berreths. They were granted full custody. They moved Kaylee to Idaho, where her cousins lived, where mountains stretched beyond the horizon, and where Patrick Frazee's name was never spoken. Again, Cheryl kept a framed picture of Kelsey beside Kaylee's crib. Every morning, she whispered, "She loved you so much." Kelsey's body was never recovered, despite Crystal's testimony, despite the burn pit remains, despite the massive property searches. There was never a funeral. No casket, no gravesite. Instead, the Berreths held a memorial service at a small chapel in Twin Falls. They displayed her flight certificate, her baby pictures, a tiny pink onesie Kaylee had worn the week she turned one, and on a table near the altar, a single cinnamon roll, untouched, hardened, just like the one investigators found in her kitchen that day. Crystal Lee was sentenced to 3 years in prison for her role in tampering with evidence. Some called it justice. Others called it a joke. Cheryl Berreth never commented publicly on Crystal's sentence, but in a rare interview she said, "My daughter was kind to everyone, too kind, even to those who didn't deserve it." Today, Kaylee is in school. She's growing up in the arms of grandparents who lost their only daughter. She doesn't know yet what happened, but someday she will. And when she does, she'll learn that her mother didn't run away. She was murdered by someone who claimed to love her, and that the world for once refused to forget. Kelsey Berreth wasn't a celebrity. She wasn't famous. She didn't chase attention. She just wanted a simple life, to fly, to be a mother, to be loved safely. But her story became a national warning, a reminder that silence can be deadly, that manipulation doesn't always come with bruises, that a smiling man with a cowboy hat and a baby carrier can still be a monster, and that sometimes justice comes, not with a headline, not with a scream, but with a life rebuilt a little. Girl held close, and a single mother's legacy that will never burn away.